Do you believe that perhaps your first encounter with starting to develop the gift came from, as I was mentioning, when you were living with your aunt and you saw that image, that woman in the doorway?
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, you went through a traumatic event because you had another bedwetting episode and you knew drama was going to happen.
Well, she had that device and the device would ring and they would wake up and shame me. So in their defense, I'm pretty certain they did not know the level of abuse that my brother and I were going through. I don't even think they knew that my mom had just put a shotgun to my head.
Welcome to Create the Best Me. I am Carmen Hecox, a personal development coach, and I am so excited to be connecting with you today. Whether you're listening to the podcast or joining us on YouTube, my goal is to help women navigate through midlife challenges with compassion, inspiration, and empowering conversation. Each week, we'll dive into thought-provoking topics designed to build self-confidence, overcome invisible woman syndrome, and find the courage to create the best version of yourself. I'll also be joined by expert guests who will share the wisdom and insights. So make yourself comfortable and let's embark on this journey together. Well, hello there, fearless midlife trailblazers. Welcome to Create the Best Me. If you are new here, I'm so glad you made it. If you're a returning listener, welcome back to the one and only place where we encourage and empower women in midlife to pursue their dreams and live life to the fullest. I am Carmen Hecox, your host and personal development coach. Today's guest is Jana Wilson, author of Wise Little One. She's also a hypnotherapist, shadow worker, meditation teacher, and the founder of the Emotional Healing System. For the past 2 decades, she has taught thousands internationally in group and private retreats. Jana trained and worked with best-selling author, physician, Dr. Deepak Chopra. Currently, she lives in the foothills of Sangre de Cristo Mountains Range in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with her husband and business partner, Dr. Lance Wilson. Today, she's here to dive deep into her newly released book, Wise Little One. Let's join the conversation now. Jana Wilson, welcome to Create the Best Me. I am so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm happy to be here.
So for the people that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background information about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm an emotional healing educator. I own a retreat center here in Santa Fe, New Mexico with my husband, who is a physician, and we lead group and private intensives.
Perfect. The reason why I have you on the show is because your book was released yesterday, July 12th. This amazing, beautiful book, Wise Little One. So tell me, what does the title mean to you?
Well, Wise Little One is our emotional self. It's the part of us that we were when we were very young and we believed anything was possible. There's wisdom there. It's why we have sayings like out of the mouth of babes, right?
I know at least to me, you seem like a very young woman. You look young, you're beautiful. But as I read your book, you seem like you have lived a very big life, a life of many.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Well, I'll be 60 in 2 years, so I'm not some spring chick, but yeah. Thank you for the compliment. So I've been doing this work for 19 years, and yeah, I've been on this journey really as you read the book, the spiritual awakening I had at 12 years old. So in the midst of trauma and chaos, I had an awakening. A spirit pulled me out of my body. It was an out-of-body experience. It was probably a near-death experience because the trauma was so intense for me. And yeah, so this isn't my first rodeo, as my ex-husband from Texas used to say.
Exactly. And I'm going to bring up just little bits and pieces of the book that really resonated with me or gave me these moments. I know in 1974, just before you, your brother, and your mom were leaving this beautiful place that you guys loved. It was a farmhouse near a fish farm. Your mom had a friend named Jerry Graves who, I don't know if maybe he was just trying to give you guys something bright to look forward to, even though you were leaving this comfortable place and going to a newer home that was smaller than what you were accustomed to. And he gave you guys tickets to see Elvis Presley in concert.
Yeah. So it was just my mom and I. My brother didn't go see Elvis, but yeah, Buddy Graves, Jerry Graves was my mom's childhood friend, and he always kind of stepped in and brightened our day, when things weren't going so good. We weren't moving to a home. We were moving to a trailer just above being homeless, in my opinion. My mom named that trailer and that trailer park Little Vietnam. To give you an idea, when I was 8 years old, I heard someone get shot and killed, and I had to testify in court. So my childhood, and adverse childhood experiences was, there's 10 questions. If you look up the ACE test that clinicians, we look at to really ascertain, how much trauma someone had in childhood and developmental years, I scored 10 out of 10. So going to see Elvis, you asked about that event, was, really monumental. Elvis, when you grow up in the South, number one, Elvis is God, especially back then. And my dad was an impersonator. So I grew up with Elvis, felt like a family member. So getting to go see him in concert was amazing. I was 7 and my mother followed his motorcade after, and Elvis ended up inviting us up to his suite. He was with Linda Thompson at the time. She was a beauty queen. And anyway, she ended up marrying later, who was it, Bruce Jenner. And I just remember, I couldn't go because I'd wet my pants because I was so excited at the concert. But in my little mind, I just felt like, oh, we'll do this next year. I didn't understand really the gravity and what a monumental event that was. And it made me think of how often we forget as adults that sense of wonder and anything's possible. And that's that wise little one. That's the part of us that believes anything's possible, right? That she can grow up and do anything. So yeah, I think it's important to connect with that part of ourselves.
And I know I spoke to a couple of my friends that I had read this book, and I said, yeah, I'm interviewing Jana Wilson. And she's someone who I consider you a rare breed, because I don't think there's a lot of people out there that can honestly say, I saw Elvis Presley in concert. And you were a child at the time that you did that. So they asked me a question that I said, yes, I'm going to ask her. Do you still have Elvis's blue scarf?
Yeah. So when I said no, and the security guy came over and gave me, Elvis took his scarf off and gave it to me. And you haven't probably got to the part in the book. Did you read the whole book?
The whole book.
Okay. Do you remember the part where I talk about in my training later on in life with Debbie Ford that a colleague from Denmark came up to me and asked me what white trash meant? Because they didn't have that saying. And that was one of the things that I was, labeled with as a child because of my parents' choices. And my mom had our trailer burnt down to get the insurance money. The scarf was in the trailer. So no, I don't have the scarf.
See, I read that part. In fact, I looked back at that part right before we got on, and I wasn't sure if that was a plan or something she joked about, or if that was something that actually really transpired, that the trailer was burned.
Oh, yeah. She absolutely did that. Her and Jerry Graves. Yeah. Yeah, it was their little concoction. Oh, okay. Well, my mom was mentally ill. She suffered from bipolar. She wouldn't stay on medication. She was high and low. I mean, it was like riding a Ferris wheel with her. You never knew what you were going to get. But, she thought she was doing the best thing for us. We went from a single wide to a double wide. So, hey.
And you bring that up where I remember in your book, you said that the first time you heard that word, white trash, and this is very heartbreaking for me because you overheard teachers speaking, and they were wondering whether your parents were coming to open house. And one of the teachers had kind of told the other teacher that, white trash.
Yeah, they won't come. And of course, my mom went the next day and showed them what white trash said. She cussed her out and told her. But for me, in third grade, I'd never heard that. I knew what trash was. You throw it away. I knew I was white, and so it was really devastating. I think it was the birth of, it really solidified a false belief I'd already received under the age of 7, because here I was 8, that I was different, that I didn't, have parents, mom and dad. I didn't have normalcy a lot of my friends had. I was already starting to observe that because now I'm in third grade. And it wasn't easy, being kind of shackled with that. But in the positive, it was the commitment I made at a young age. Oh, I'll show them. So it's really driven me to success, right? All of these challenges that I went through that I share in the book were the impetus for me to stay steadfast and consistent towards my vision, towards what I was growing towards, to be the cycle breaker of that very codependent, enmeshed, dysfunctional family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing that kind of struck me is that children don't choose to be in the situation that they're at. And I think that as an adult, a teacher, I think the teachers go into the profession because they want to help. It just hurt me to see that a teacher labeled you.
Mm-hmm.
Gave you something that you didn't ask for. This is where you're at.
And I think most teachers do the best they can. But even when my daughter was in kindergarten, the teacher had, she was her star student. She loved her. Oh, she was cute with her bows and her blonde hair, and I'd dress her all up. And I was volunteering during that time, and Taylor was in kindergarten, so she was, say, 5. And the teacher said to me in earshot of another student, that family is white trash. Now, here I am adult, I'm a mom, and I'm hearing a teacher tell me in earshot of a little boy who had, his hair was like in a mullet. We're talking like 1991, he had an earring in his ear. And she said that, and I lost it. I got up, I went to the principal's office. I told the principal what happened. I was volunteering. This happened. That is unacceptable. And they fired her.
And rightfully
I was
so.
But the fact that I had that experience as a child and then to experience as an adult, it was bizarre to me. Like, how did that happen, right? What are the odds?
Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe perhaps it was something the other teacher should have done when you were labeled.
So we're going back in time, right? I'm, close to 60. So that's a long time ago. We certainly do not teach emotional education now in schools. Adults, children, we don't have this kind of knowledge. We prize IQ, not EQ. If we taught in even elementary school, but even like, say, middle school, and we began to, have an EQ 101 where kids could talk about their feelings and understand about core emotion and painful emotions and how to manage them. And imagine what a different society we would have today, Carmen.
But I think this is something that you hear about it because it happens on social media and stuff. We talk about bullying and cyberbullying. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, that's a form of bullying, labeling children because they're in a situation that's not the same as the situation I'm in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Judging a child based on their parents it's just unconscious behavior. And let's face it, there's a lot of unconscious people on the planet.
Exactly. And another thing that really resonated with me is when you were temporarily living with your Aunt Jeannie. And it wasn't a place where you wanted to be. I mean, maybe other people would have thought, oh, wow, she hit the jackpot because your aunt did have money and she lived in a beautiful home. She had things that most people would say, oh, yeah, that's my dream life. But even though that was a dream life, it was still a very, at least in my opinion, based upon what I read, it seemed like a very cold place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I went from poverty, right? And I had I would visit my Aunt Jenny, but not often. My mom stayed pretty estranged from her because of my mom's choices and my mom's mental illness. And there were a big gap in age. They were about 8 years apart. So she was already out of the home by the time her dad died. And now here I'm having to go there to live. And I start wetting the bed again, which is a byproduct of acute trauma. I was under a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. I couldn't sleep well. They were giving me Valium. They were taking little pieces of Valium. So I was drugged a lot as a child. I mean, it was bad. It was my grandmother was my inner resource. When we go through developmental trauma, and my trauma even went back as far as preconscious, precognitive trauma, because anytime you're in the womb, and I write it very metaphorically and poetically, this idea of me flipping myself, putting the cord around my neck, right? When my mom was pregnant with me, because imagine everything's being fed to me. So all the adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, all the stress hormones my mom was going through, being married to my father who was abusing her, cheating on her, and she's pregnant with me, I'm feeling. So it was during hypnotherapy training that I realized I did it. I saw the vision of me wrapping the cord and flipping. And so in Wise Little One, I share that. Obviously, I do not know what I did in the womb, right? I just had that awareness that I didn't want to be born. So knowing I was breech and the cord was wrapped around my neck, I shared that to let the reader know in case somebody might be reading it as well and say, oh, I was receiving all those cortisol and adrenaline and all those toxic hormones of stress in the womb. No wonder I'm a drama queen or I'm a, whatever it is. Like we understand it with addiction and drugs that babies take it on. It's not uncommon. Like it's not hard to figure out that it would happen as well with the chemicals of stress. The same receptor sites in the brain of a heroin addict is someone who's emotionally an addict. And it's fair to say my mom, she had battered woman syndrome. She was an addict to my dad, to being treated bad. And I was just absorbing it all.
And so let's say, for example, you had mentioned that you were inheriting or receiving all of these emotions and cortisol and stuff. If one of the listeners here perhaps may have been born in a situation like yours where the mother was involved in trauma, how can someone like that receive healing?
Well, it's the same path for anyone. If you have preconscious, precognitive, which is what that's called, trauma, and then there's intergenerational trauma. There's trauma that it's the Bible says the sins of the father are passed down. That's really alluding to intergenerational trauma. We know that this is a fact now because they took rats and they sprayed like a rose scent. And then every time they sprayed the rose scent, they would shock the rat. They stopped shocking the rats, only sprayed the rose scent. The rats behaved as if they were still being shocked. A year or two goes by, those same rats have babies, or time goes by and those same rats have babies. Now the babies, when the rose is sprayed, behave as if they're being shocked. So that's how we know that we take on trauma from our parents. And in Wise Little One, I give the reader the examples of my mom's possible belief systems and traumas that happen in her family of origin and my father's family of origin, which made them the perfect recipe to be attracted and have a relationship because they were two wounded people come together. They create a very enmeshed, dysfunctional, codependent relationship. And that's what my parents did. So the path to healing is becoming aware that trauma is different for everybody, right? Like, of course, somebody compares their trauma to mine. It might seem very small. I'm working with a woman next month. Her trauma is intense. I mean, she was kidnapped as a young teenager. She was brutally raped. I mean, there were horrible things. And she's got so much grit. She's a single mother. She works for the government. She's got 2 master's degrees. So it's fascinating to me. It appears we're not a victim. When we're children and something's done to us, of course, we're a victim. But at some point, we must take responsibility that it happened, right? I can't change the past. Now, what is the lesson? What if it happened for me and not to me? And so in the book, on Wise Little One, my intent was to show the reader, as soon as I made that shift in perception, miracles began to happen because I became very empowered, right? I began to see, oh, I'm not a victim of my childhood. I'm not a victim of people classifying me as trash. I'm not a victim of the choices my parents made. It all was in really divine design. And if I can extract the wisdom, then I won't repeat what my parents did. And so at a very young age, I began on that journey of what was the gift of having a mentally ill mother? What was the gift of having an absent, abusive father? And how can I heal from that? And I did the healing work. I became trained in a lot of different modalities and developed this emotional healing system.
Do you believe that perhaps your first encounter with starting to develop the gift came from, as I was mentioning, when you were living with your aunt and you saw that image, that woman in the doorway? Mm-hmm. And during that time, you went through a traumatic event because you had another bedwetting episode and you knew drama was going to happen.
Well, she had that device and the device would ring and they would wake up and shame me. So in their defense, I'm pretty certain they did not know the level of abuse that my brother and I were going through. I don't even think they knew that my mom had just put a shotgun to my head. So I don't know that that information was ever given. I went to see my aunt when she was older and she had dementia, but she remembered me and we were having a conversation. It was before she had really lost her mind. My mom died of Alzheimer's. So it's interesting. Both of them had dementia. And I asked her and she said she didn't know until years later what had happened. And I believe her that she didn't know. And she was operating from her own level of awareness. But the incident that you're talking about for the listeners was I'm in that house. I've been taken away from my brother, from my familiarity, even though it wasn't what I wanted. It was still familiar, right? My mom, my brother, the cadence of our life. Now I'm in this home. I'm having drivers. I mean, this is in the 70s and they had car phones. I had guards. Guards would take me to school. I mean, I went from extreme poverty to living like multimillionaires is what they were. And at that time, that was a big deal. They even had a private plane. So I'm lying in bed and I remember seeing an image and it looked like an angel. And I sensed everything was going to be okay. I did not know it was the future me. Now, we live in a very mysterious universe. Was it the future me? I don't know. But later on, I was doing training with John Bradshaw. He was a PhD out of Houston. I trained with him on inner child work in the 90s. He's passed away now. But he took us through a process and he said, go back to a time in your childhood where you need to rescue yourself. And it was at my aunt's. You would have thought it would have been other places, right? Like I had other traumas. It was that house. The shame was so intense in that house by my 2 fraternal cousins, the twins, and my aunt, that was where I went. And my future self was standing at the foot of the bed and I could see my little self. And I thought, when I came out of it, I thought, oh my God, I remembered the memory from childhood. I thought that was me that came to rescue me or tell me everything's going to be okay.
And that's so strange because you do have blonde hair.
Yeah.
That gave me chills. That's so weird.
Yeah, it was, I think. I mean, who knows? Like I said, we live in a mysterious universe, how things happen. But it was definitely healing for me and gave me hope. And very soon thereafter, my grandmother came and got me which she was my security. She was my stability. So once she came, everything, I never wet the bed again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she gave you comfort.
Yeah. She was my everything. She was my inner resource. So children who are going through a lot of trauma, if they can find a resource, a teacher, a pastor, a Sunday school teacher, a neighbor, someone that they feel safe with and that they can, sometimes it's guidance counselors in school or a grandparent, as it was in my case. And then, of course, I created an inner resource. Going through so much trauma, I prayed a lot as a child. So it really developed a deep spiritual connection to spirit, of which now I am a spiritual teacher in many ways. Yes, I'm an emotional healing educator, but I teach psychospirituality. So it's spirituality combined with psychology. And the reason why people suffer is because they're disconnected from spirit. And so that's the first place we start. It's kind of the foundation.
And I think in your book, even early on, before any of these events, you always talk about being very connected with the spirit.
Mm-hmm. You know, through nature, through the trauma. Like, because imagine if you're in a really traumatic situation as an adult, what do we usually go to? We start praying like, oh, dear God, help me. So I'm a child doing that. And so I'm so innocent and I feel like I'm still tethered to the spiritual realm. So it became very easy for me to hear the voice of spirit, to be guided, to hear reassurance. And then, of course, at 12, I'm pulled out of my body and I have that out of body experience where I'm told, those aren't your parents, I am, which to me was God. And this isn't your life, this is. And I just felt that peace that passes all understanding. And I've been very blessed throughout my life to be able to just drop in and connect.
And it takes me to back in 1984 when good old Buddy Graves won $10,000 in a Super Bowl bet. And he took you guys to Costa Rica. But before that, you were fascinated with cosmopolitan magazines. And you were looking through and you're looking at these models where they're doing their photo shoot. And you become mesmerized by Costa Rica and, you know, all the beauty behind it. And I think that you sort of saw yourself there.
Mm-hmm. I didn't sort of. I did. I would just imagine. I was using my imagination a lot because, again, children in trauma disassociate. My disassociation became my kind of lifeline. And when I would disassociate from trauma, I began to build an imaginary world. And Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. He said, imagination will take you where knowledge never could. And so looking back and writing the book, I began to realize, wow, I've been manifesting since I was a kid. I manifested seeing Elvis. I manifested going to Costa Rica. And then, of course, having never traveled and being poor, now I'm in a country that now they would call it developing, but back then it was still third world. And of course, they had war next door in Nicaragua, and it was election time. And I manifest meeting the president-elect, come home and see him being interviewed by Barbara Walters because he won the election. And I put that picture in the book because it's pretty outlandish. It's kind of like, wait a minute, you know, like how's she experiencing all this? But imagine how that just blew open my consciousness, my ability to believe anything's possible. Mm-hmm. As children, we believe that. But by the time you're a teenager, you stop believing it. And I didn't. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, if I can do this, what else can I do? So then I manifested moving to South Florida to go to school. No one in my family had ever even graduated high school, much less went away to college. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a big deal.
Yeah. And just to add, when you went to Costa Rica, you did meet the president of Costa Rica. I mean, it was because Buddy was persistent and he was banging on the door of this restaurant that you guys were told this is your must.
They were like, oh, you're American. Come on in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was very, very fascinating.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's when you became more in tune with the imagination, visioning your life the way you wanted to see it, the way it's supposed to be?
Yeah, no, I was already doing that. I was doing that as a child, climbing trees. I was always living in my imagination. Barbie dolls were my avenue, right? So I was always envisioning traveling and having a healthy relationship. And, really that was my focus because I didn't have that at home. I didn't have anyone modeling a healthy relationship. We certainly didn't travel anywhere. We were poor, and except to maybe my grandmother's house a couple hours away. And so, yeah, that just only solidified my ability to continue to imagine. And so I just continued on that path, really not knowing what I was doing until I was 20. And the book, this little book, fell off the bookshelf. You can't even buy this now. It's out of print, but it has, chapters like The Law of Attraction in 1935. So I began practicing a lot of these principles very young before they were ever popularized. No one knew what law of attraction was when I was 20 years old. And that's almost 40 years ago. So I just began to understand metaphysics, right? And understand that my attention is my most powerful asset. And what I place it on fertilizes whatever I'm placing it on. So I began to be very mindful about my attention. The gift too, Carmen, when my mom would go into these, back then it was called a nervous breakdown, when she would have those nervous breakdowns and try to slice her wrist, which she never went deep enough because, let's face it, she was just a cry for help, She would come back after electroconvulsive therapy with a rewired brain. Now, we didn't know about neuroplasticity back then, but working with Deepak Chopra and Dr. David Simon, Dr. Simon, who was a neurologist, Deepak's partner, told me that when your mom had electroconvulsive therapy, he asked me a question. He said, how would she come back? I said, oh my gosh, amazing. We read the Bible front to cover. She got into mysticism. She started teaching me Raymond Moody's work on near-death experiences, and she started teaching me Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, like a lot of really deep esoteric teachings. And she taught me how to meditate. And then, of course, because her environment didn't change, she would revert back to the same. Well, I was like a sponge. She was just downloading. I really feel like we had a soul contract, my mom and I, that her mental illness ended up putting me on this path where I've helped thousands of people. The goal, of course, of this book and the next book that's coming out, which is the Emotional Healing System book, the guidebook, a self-help book that'll be co-authored with my husband, who's a physician, to help more people heal, there is a path, regardless of how much trauma you've been through.
And the reason why I'm going to go back to where I said that you just seem like a very mature child, even when you were a child, and you're mature now, but it almost seemed like, I think it was you were 4 years old and you were cleaning up the mess your father made, because he would go in these spells and he would beat on your mom and he would break things. And you would go into autopilot, grab the broom, grab the dustpan, and just clean up, so that it was almost as if to get rid of all the evidence of a traumatic event took place. And I felt like at the age of 4, when you needed a mom to comfort you, to hold you, to make you feel like everything was okay,
safe,
you were the one doing that to your mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it was, I was trying to make order out of the chaos, and probably a lot of listeners, that can become OCD. You can get really compulsive about trying to create order in the outer world because you feel so disorderly within. And as a child, that's what I did. And so many people I've worked with who've had trauma in childhood have similar experiences that I did, and trying to clean and control the outcome. I believe that we are different soul ages, and I definitely believe I'm an old soul. I don't believe my mother or my father were. I think that's probably what happens. Our creator, we have different levels of souls within a family unit. And I was the disruptor. I was the one who called out the elephant in the room. I was the one who had more wisdom than the adults. And it didn't take me long to come to that discovery. It was around 12 years old when I had the out of body experience, when I realized, aha, these people don't know what I know. I just assume people, because, we're having these thoughts or thinking similar thoughts. And then I started to realize, wait, they don't see things the way I see. Like at a young age, for example, very aware around probably 9 years old that everything was temporary. I began to become very aware, this too shall pass, so that I wouldn't get too attached when things were down or too attached when things were good, because I knew they would both be impermanent and pass, which helped me navigate the life I was living. Because let's face it, you don't know what you're coming home to when you live with parents who abuse one another in this kind of dynamic. You don't know if there's going to be food to eat that night. You don't know if the electricity is going to be on. You don't know, is dad going to be beating mom? Is mom going to be depressed in bed and we've got to fend for ourselves? So I began to have awareness of a lot of really difficult things, and have peace with it in a way.
And what I really liked is you read this book by Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you said that this thought came into your head, and I know you've quoted this, that what if your soul chose your parents? And the empowering feeling that you got when you suddenly, it wasn't like we don't choose our parents, but you turned it and said, my soul chose these parents.
Yeah. And we don't know that, right? We don't know what happens after we die. So reincarnation and this idea that the soul, that our Creator gives us infinite opportunities to grow and learn in Earth School, and it's certainly a better, for me, paradigm than believing in a heaven and a hell. And that's how I was raised. And I respect people's beliefs. But for me, that was very finite and fearful. And the direct experience I was having because of the trauma was telling me different. And I trusted it. You know the truth because it sets you free. So I began to feel a sense of freedom. And so by the time I read that book, and it's about this physician who starts taking his patients through hypnosis, and they start sharing about when they were a man living in Rome or whatever. And a lot of these people have phobias, and they would overcome the phobia. But reading the book, I really bought Dr. Weiss. Of course, I respected him as a physician, his education, his training, just who he was. And he's been my teacher also since 1990. And I've studied with him and became a regressionist with him. But yeah, it was, I thought, and I ask clients this, I say, are you open? We don't know, to this idea of reincarnation. And I actually won't work with someone who isn't. I'm just asking them to be open to the mystery of it. Because if you've had a lot of trauma, like the young lady that's coming out next month with the horrific childhood, she was actually a birth of a rape. It's one thing after another, her childhood. And she said, I grew up Christian and that's against Christian. And so no, I said, okay, well, read this book and then come back to me after you read it and tell me how it feels, how it settles with you. She read it within 2 days and said, if this is true, I feel like I could really be liberated from my childhood. I could look at myself differently, like not a victim of all of that. Why did it happen? Why didn't I get a different path and be angry at God? It would actually make me closer to God and feel like I'm here for something special. Like I began to view myself like, man, I must be a pretty powerful old soul to have chose all of that. That was the game changer when I took responsibility that I don't know if that's the truth, Carmen, obviously. All I know is how I feel when I think that way feels really good and empowering.
The strength that you get from believing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds good. Another thing about your book that got me, because I was also a single mom. I raised 2 children by myself. And so I
Mhm.
feel that you and I connected because you came from a single mom, but you became a single mom. And being a single mom, it's hard. A lot of people don't realize,
Mhm.
especially when you're young and a single mom, it's hard. It is so hard to
Mhm.
you not only just take care of yourself, but you also have a responsibility of children. And you were being evicted from your apartment that you were renting on top of a garage. And you did what I did in many of my situations where things weren't like I wanted them to be. You break down, you cry. But through that
Mhm.
crying, a thought came into your head that this is happening for you, not to you, that you were going to find yourself homeless because you didn't have a backup home. Your grandmother was gone, Buddy was gone. So it was
Yeah.
all you at that point.
Yeah. My mom was living in another state, and it wasn't on top of a garage. It was a garage. My whole backside of my apartment was a garage door. I mean, it was not, it still smelled like oil. And what's funny is I was only there a few months, and I felt like such a failure. Taylor was in kindergarten, and I had started a new business, and I was really just doing part-time, like kind of Girl Friday secretarial work. And I had been laying in bed every night, envisioning living at the beach on a condo, and just holding these images, still doing my imagery, still doing my law of attraction work. And all of the sudden, this happens, this eviction. And in the moment, of course, I went to fear because I have a child and I'm scared I'm going to be homeless. Of course, I had friends. I knew I wouldn't literally be homeless. I could go couch surf for a while, but that wasn't acceptable to raise a child. So I wasn't the type to ask for help that way anyway. I had pride. I didn't want to. And I had been studying, doing some reading Tony Robbins, and he has that quote, life's happening for you, not to you. And I could hear him in my head, change your physiological state. So I jumped up, I started getting excited, training my body to behave as if I just won the lotto. Like I just received news, not of eviction, but I'm a millionaire. And in that moment, it was as if spirit was able to give me the intuition and the insight to call someone that I hadn't thought of for a couple of years that I'd met through a church group that I had attended. And he always said, call him if I ever needed help. Well, clearly I needed help. And so I called him up, and the next thing you know, he gives me a job. He gives me a corporate apartment. Guess where? Right on the beach. Just like I was imagining. And it took me a minute to realize, oh, I manifested this eviction because I didn't want to be here. I wanted to be on the beach. Now, how it happened, I could have had different ways of reacting and responding to it. But thankfully, I was still doing work, a lot of personal development. I'm like 27 at the time. And so I was able to navigate it and get my daughter and I out of that situation. And the next thing you know, I'm traveling a courier for his business, flying private to the Cayman Islands and everywhere. I went literally from the garage to the penthouse.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That is so amazing.
That's a crazy story.
It is a crazy story because being a single mom, you just think, well, the best that it can get is I'll find another place. But you went to the major extremes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, when did you begin to parent your inner child?
I would say probably in the 90s, I began to understand the concept of the inner child. In the early 90s, reading Homecoming from John Bradshaw. And then when I had saved up a little money, I was able to fly to Houston, and I did a weekend retreat with him. It was a small group, and I continued, but he didn't teach really how to specifically connect. So it was just kind of this vague idea of inner child. Nobody was really talking deeply and teaching how to reparent your inner child. And so I formulated these 3 steps. The inner child is our feeling self, right? Because when we're little, under the age of, say, 8, we're all emotion. We perceive and receive the world through a lens of our emotions because the intellect's not formed. And I teach the first step is you connect to spiritual guidance, because a loving adult needs to be connected, right? We can't do this on our own. So this work is very spiritually based, as I said. So you connect with spiritual guidance, you ask for support. Say, I'm dealing with the emotion of anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. So I'll sit down and I'll ask Spirit, I need help dealing with this anxiety. Then step 2, I'll see the anxiety as the child. So I'll just kind of tune in. How old is this anxious part of me? Well, it's usually like 3, 4, 5, very young. And my shoulders are up. I remember my mom was always saying, put your shoulders down. Well, I was a nervous wreck. I would have been ADHD probably. They would have diagnosed me with, if they had those diagnoses back then, because I was very hyper and very anxious and couldn't sit still. And so you connect with the child and you ask, what am I doing? What relationship am I staying in? What work am I doing? What's happening that's making you feel anxious? And then you listen. Well, you're telling me that the book's not going to do well. You can't do this, that you're not smart enough, or maybe I'm having some kind of internal dialogue where I'm beating myself up. And then, of course, that's going to make me feel anxious. But if I relate with the anxiety as a child and I'm a loving adult, now I've created space. I'm not anxious. Little Jana's anxious. Now I, as an adult, can talk to little Jana, realize what I'm doing that's causing the anxiety, and of course, not do that. And then the third step is ask Spirit, what is the action step? What do I need to do? Because nothing happens if we don't take action to alleviate this anxiety. Well, Spirit might say, I've got your back. Let go about the book, just focus in this moment, give your gifts to others and trust and have faith. I'm going to take care of everything. And then all of a sudden I feel at peace. The anxiety's gone. And it might take me just 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to do that. But what happens when someone doesn't have the tool, they don't have that knowledge, they're ignorant to it, they don't know how to do this work, then they push the anxiety aside. So it's like having little Jana, little child, little Carmen's here. She's saying, mommy, mommy, mommy. And you're like, shh, shh, let's go watch TV, go eat something. Oh, let's call a friend and talk. It's all doing these external things. It's not turning inside and connecting with your soul, connecting with the child, and realizing you have everything you need within you. And that you have to manage these emotions or they build up, build up, build up. That's why we have sayings like, you're never upset for the reason you think. Right? Mm-hmm. Because we build them and it just starts to pile. Now something gets triggered and we're really upset, or we're disproportionately behaving a certain way over something small. And somebody's saying, don't sweat the small stuff, or you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Meanwhile, they don't understand that this is just the tip of the iceberg. You've been packing this stuff for years.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Another thing that I liked is when you asked Debbie about caring about what other people said about you or thought about you. Can you talk about what she told you and how you were able to release yourself, get the freedom to care more about what Jana thinks about Jana?
Well, that's the whole key, right? You don't care what other people think. And for so long I did. I thought I did. I told Debbie, and we're talking about Debbie Ford, the New York Times bestselling author who I work with. And one time I said, Debbie, I feel like I care too much what people think. And she said, oh, you don't. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, think of a time when someone gives you a compliment or really praises you and tells you, and what's kind of your go-to? I said, I'll probably say I could have done better, or I'll deflect the compliment. I can't receive it. And she said, yeah, because you don't care what they think. If you cared what they thought, then you'd be like, oh, thank you. But as soon as they criticize you or they judge you and you get upset about it, you think you care what they think. You don't. You're just agreeing with them. So again, you have to look within and ask yourself, well, what do I think they think about me? This is really shadow work. Oh, I think they think I'm irresponsible. Okay. Well, I'm a 360-degree personality. Every quality that exists on this planet has the potential to exist within me. So yeah, irresponsible. Maybe I judge that part of me. So if someone I feel is judging me for being irresponsible or unprofessional, say, then all of a sudden it's like a wound they pick. And then I'm like, ow. And I think it's really them, but really it's me not loving and accepting that sometimes, key word, I might show up irresponsible. And hey, sometimes I might need to accept I'm irresponsible over others. I'm not responsible over others. If I think I am, I become controlling and manipulative. Even if I think I'm doing something to help them, it's not my place. So irresponsible is one of those qualities a lot of clients I've worked with have a hard time accepting. But once they get it, that they're helpless and irresponsible over others, they can accept it. And then wherever it's showing up in their life, where they are literally being irresponsible for their own feelings or maybe their finances or their health, or they can start to clean that up. So the gift in accepting the people are just showing us in the mirror of relationship what we judge within ourselves. But when you don't, again, have the knowledge, because no one's taught us to see, oh, wait, they're just holding a mirror up. I'm actually judging myself for being irresponsible because I really don't care what they think. Because if I accepted that I was irresponsible and they judged me, it would just be water on a duck's back. I'd be like, oh, well, that's spot it. You got it. That's the pot calling the kettle black. I would just kind of shrug it off as, okay, they're projecting onto me something they don't like within themselves. Happens all the time.
It does.
Right.
It does. That's how I wanted to get you to talk about it, because I talk to, or my podcast is for women in midlife. And I think that when we reach midlife, we start to become more concerned with what people would think about the way we look, the way we act, or what we're not doing that we used to do.
Yeah, I think that when we're younger, we really care. I think the older you get, I mean, certainly once you hit 50, it's a big who cares what anybody thinks. It's like, especially if you've done some work on yourself, you've been in therapy, you're really self-reflective, you're looking at your behavior, your beliefs, you're making changes. I feel like the older I get, I'm very detached from other people's opinion. Sometimes it hurts when you feel that judgment from someone, but once you understand, you just look within and say, okay, little Jana, I'm judging you for being irresponsible or unprofessional. And then I go and make amends with myself and heal it. And then of course, I'm going to get tested, right? There's going to be the test. Universe is always like, let's give her a test, see if she's getting the lesson.
And I know in the beginning of the book, you start off where you're at this amazing retreat. You're at this amazing retreat. It just it sounds so peaceful. But yet, little Jana's not in peace. Little Jana's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Do you feel that maybe, and this is just depending on what you believe, do you believe that maybe little Jana was tugging you, that you were on the wrong path and that she was trying to get you onto the right path? Because the path that little Jana pulled you to led you to meet your husband and build your emotional healing system.
Yeah, no, the emotional healing system was already built. I had been already doing that 13 years before I met Lance. So I was at a retreat that you're talking about in California. It's at the Epic Esalen, which is, on Big Sur. And it was really a culmination. I had always wanted to attend a retreat there. And I had just never found the right teacher who was leading a retreat there that I wanted to go to. But I also had a vision of leading my own retreats there. And yes, little Jana, my intuition, didn't feel comfortable there. There was a lot of nudity and I had sexual abuse as a child and I'm modest and I didn't feel comfortable with that. I wouldn't listen to her though. Every time she would tell me, leave, let's leave, because I spent a lot of money to be there. in HeartMath, I'm a trained HeartMath facilitator. The HeartMath Institute's done all the research on the power of the heart. The heart picks up in the field around us in our environment. Research shows up to like maybe 2 weeks before an event happens, you start getting a message. It's definitely 20 seconds before an event happens. It really is activated. So I think I was meditating 6 hours a day. I mean, I was very quiet inside. There wasn't a lot of chatter in my mind. And so I was really connected to my soul and to my emotions, little Jana. And every time I'd come out of a meditation, she would say, leave. And I was 49, a little feeling desperate. Like, am I going to meet my man? I left my marriage that I wasn't happy in. He was an alcoholic and kind of repeating, the patterns. He was a nice alcoholic. He wasn't like my dad, and yeah, I just listened, and it led me to get on a plane the next day that I wasn't supposed to be on 4 days early. And I met my husband, sat next to him on a Southwest flight, and the rest was history. We went out on a date 4 nights later, and we both knew we were in love. 2 years to almost meeting on that plane, we married.
Mm-hmm.
The book's really a love story too,
It
right?
is. But what I really loved about that particular story is that being that I was a single mom, you were a single mom, and I think we were a little bit more conscientious. We're real scared to get married again. What I loved about your story is that you quickly listened to little Jana and you built boundaries. In that you knew that relationship was the perfect relationship. This was the perfect person for you. But you had to build these boundaries.
Yeah, he wasn't as far along the path of, I was divorced. I'd been single now for 2.5 years by the time I met him. And he was just on his journey. And the old Jana would have showed up differently. The night before I met Lance, something, again, a really mystical experience happened for me, because when you meditate for that many hours, and I was on my 3rd day at that retreat before I left, I was very tuned in to the voice in my head. And I had went out to dinner after I left the retreat, and I heard my internal voice saying, what do these couples have that I don't? Why can't I find my beloved? Yeah. Poor me. And I caught it really fast. And as soon as I did, I saw myself as a child sitting across the table. And then what happened next was miraculous. It was as if my adult self went into the body of a 5-year-old me. And the 5-year-old me just showed me my entire life and how we ended up in Carmel, California at this restaurant. And what an amazing human I am. And I just fell in love with myself. I thought, I have done so much work. I have committed my life to helping others. I fall down in awe. There's a Rumi poem or Hafiz poem that says, by God, when you see the beauty of yourself, you'll fall down in awe. In that moment, that was the deepest self-love I've ever felt, the deepest love that I've ever felt. I want to break out into Whitney Houston's song, the greatest love is happening to me. I mean, and I knew, Carmen, leaving that restaurant that night, that whether I met my beloved or not, I was going to be okay. I had myself. I had little Jana. I'm never alone. And I love her, and I'm going to put her feelings first. And so by the time I met Lance, and you're talking about boundaries, I chose little Jana. She got very anxious and nervous that he was still married. He hadn't filed yet. He was separated, living in a different house. And I had already taken that path, and you probably know too. Yeah, it's sometimes you get back together and you break up. It's kind of and he had kids, 2 boys that were teenagers, but still, I knew that there was a possibility. And little Jana said, I don't feel safe. And I told him early in the dating, just the first couple of weeks of talking, I can't date you. I don't date married men. He's like, married men? I'm separated. I said, no, you haven't even filed. And I choose me. And he got the lesson. That was Thursday. Monday, he filed. So he showed me he had integrity. He showed me that he was going to move forward. But I let him know, like, I'm a woman of value and I value myself, and I'll only be with someone in a relationship that matches and mirrors that same value. So it was really a big step for me.
It was a big step. And I think that any single mom or single woman may have been in awe with the fact that he's handsome. Not only is he handsome, but he's also a doctor. And so you're like, you start dreaming of the possibilities, but you didn't dream of those possibilities. You dreamed about the possibilities of being in love with Jana.
Yes.
And what was good for Jana.
What was best for me. And a lot of people call that selfishness. It's really self-responsibility. I'm responsible for me and my feelings. Lance isn't. My marriage to my husband is so healthy. There is no drama. There's no chaos because we both take responsibility for our feelings. And then we articulate and communicate. We have a saying that the truth is sexy. So we tell each other microscopic truths. This is work of Gay and Kathleen Hendricks from Conscious Loving. Their book is fantastic. If anyone hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. But it's about microscopic truth. Like, when you said this, I told myself a story that you think I'm stupid or whatever it is. And was that your intent? And then the other person, rather than when you made me feel stupid. No, he can't make me feel. I choose what I feel, right? So I take responsibility and I communicate that to him. So he and I tell him, we've got to write a relationship book because I think we're so blessed that we've been able to create and cultivate this relationship and find one another and now work together and help other people. I think we are certainly a beacon of a light for many people who say, oh, that's possible. Many clients that I have and students look to Lance and I, and especially the single women, and say, oh, that's possible to have a relationship that's healthy and co-committed, not codependent.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Jana, what are you working on next?
Oh, well, the book, the Emotional Healing System Guidebook, a practical guidebook to help people with each of these modalities that we teach. Lance is co-authoring it with me. We've hired a developmental editor, which is kind of the book writing process that you write, you throw it off to your editor, they help you flesh it out. We're in the process of that now. The editor feels like we'll be able to get that done probably by November. So the book will be coming out sometime early 2024. We just finished wrapping up a filming of the retreat. So we lead group retreats and private. So we decided to do an at-home retreat. During the pandemic, when everybody was staying home, I was like, I had this idea and we just never got around to it. And so we filmed in April. Now we've got all the edited films stuff back, and that online course is going to launch soon within the next week. So I'm excited about that. We also have a group retreat coming up in September, and the group retreat is the same content as a private. So we have a healing center here, 2,600 square feet. We can house up to 6 people, but we do one-on-one work. We also do semi-private with men because men need emotional healing. You know, they're really taught to not feel their emotions. They get to middle age. They're like, who am I? They have the crisis. I love working with men. I think because I had a brother and I was so close to him, I can really connect with men and create a bond, and they feel safe. They cry. They tell me things they've told nobody. So I can really hold space for men. I love doing that work. And my private work stays booked. It's booked until next year. I'm interviewing for slots for next year. A lot of people want to do private. It's expensive, but for somebody who's ready and they're like, I've been doing therapy, I've been trying everything, I'm ready to go for a deep dive, the private is the thing. I have a wait list. So when people can't, we'll fill it in, but and a teacher training. We train people in this work. So yeah, we've got a lot going on.
Holy moly, you guys are busy. Very busy. And writing a book at the same time.
Yeah. And trying to launch a book. Yeah.
So where can people find you?
I have two websites, janawilson.com, Jana, wilson.com. You can give that to them in your show notes. That is the book website. There is a pre-order for the book, but we put that up. Really, the launch is when everybody will get it, and the book will be available on Amazon. And then we also have emotionalhealingretreats.com. You can find me there, and that lists all of our retreats, the online course, the public events, and the private.
That's great information. Jana, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to read your book in advance.
Oh.
It is a beautiful book. I will say that there were moments where I cried. There were moments where in my heart, I believe that your mom really, really wanted to be present. She wanted to be the best mom she could be, but unfortunately, because she did suffer of mental illness, I think that it made life difficult for her. And so I really believe that after reading this book.
My mom we're all wabi-sabi, the Japanese term for perfectly imperfect. Mom, no one I believe is inherently all bad. Even my dad, there's goodness, and we either focus on the good or we focus on the bad. I knew that I had lessons from both of them, and I feel I corrected. I have a very healthy daughter. She's 35. I have a grandson, very emotionally intelligent. My daughter's husband and her have a very healthy relationship. So I believe I broke the cycle of the dysfunction of that family. So
you did. Well, thank you very much. I will include all the links to where people can find you, all of the events coming up in my show notes. And once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this show.
Carmen. It was a pleasure.
Can I ask you a sincere question? And please be honest with me. Did Jana give you goosebumps too? Now it's my turn to be honest with you. I felt like Jana and I bonded just from reading her book. She shares so much about her childhood and adulthood in this book. I love the way Jana quickly changes the narrative of what is happening to her to what is happening for her in this book. There is so much valuable information and teachings in this 269-page book. If you haven't purchased Wise Little One, honestly, I don't understand why you haven't. You won't be disappointed. Jana's information and this episode transcripts can be found at createthebestme.com/EP020. If you want to experience Jana's teaching and wisdom, I highly recommend you purchase Wise Little One. The book is available online, and while you're there, pick up a second copy for a friend who could use Jana's encouraging words. Again, I want to thank Jana Wilson for providing me with an advanced reader's copy of Wise Little One and sharing her wisdom and insights with us. It was definitely my honor having the opportunity to read Wise Little One and interviewing Jana. If this episode resonated with you, please hit subscribe to stay updated. Join me next week as I'll dive into the topic of career changes in midlife. You won't want to miss that episode. Until next time, keep dreaming big, take care of yourself, and remember, you're beautiful, strong, and capable of creating the best version of yourself. Thank you for watching. Catch you next week. Bye for now.